Hello, this is Sarah. I'm going to tell you Sheila's story today, which goes by this title. My relatives changed the locks and tossed my belongings out on the grass following Dad's death. Now, this house is ours. Leave. I grinned and remained silent. This house was not listed in the will because it belongs to me, the notary added, causing their cheeks to go white. Well, let's go. My assistant knocked on my office door as I was at my desk reviewing quarterly reports. Someone has come to see you, Sheila. Claims to be your father. In the middle of signing, my pen froze. Since that day when I was 22, when they essentially tossed me out on the street, I had not seen or spoken to any of my family members for about 10 years. I tried to speak steadily as I added, "Tell him I'll be right down. You must comprehend why this was such a shock, so allow me to go back up here. Sheila is my name. I work for a really large firm as the finance director, and I'm 32. I put forth a lot of effort to get here. But what about my familial situation? That is a whole other matter. My mother simply up and went when I was 6 years old. One day when I was at school and Dad was at work, she packed her things. She left me there with a message for my father stating that she was no longer able to do the family thing after running off with a guy she had been seeing behind Dad's back. Dad was heartbroken. He immediately filed for divorce, and Mom didn't even bother to appear in court. For 3 years, it was just Dad and me. You know, Dad served me breakfast every morning, helped me with my homework, and drove me to soccer practice because he did his hardest. We were quite excellent at our regimen. I reasoned that perhaps we would be better off without her anyhow. However, Mother returned when I was 9 years old. And here's the thing, she was accompanied by a young child, about 2 or 3 years old. Large blue eyes and blonde locks. Mom was sobbing and pleading with Dad to return her. She claimed that the child was his daughter and that she was unaware of her pregnancy at the time of her departure. She claimed to have made a grave error and want to return home. A DNA test was required by Dad. According to the results, the child was really my sister, Dad's daughter. Mom was saying, "Please, I was stupid," repeatedly. "I wish to make this right. I want us to reunite as a family." Her father simply forgiven her. In a modest ceremony, they were remarried. My sister Emma was too little to comprehend what was going on, so I was the only child present. With the exception of having a younger sister to assist look after, I hoped that things would return to normal. And boy, was I mistaken. Everything changed as soon as Mom returned home. She behaved as though I were a stranger residing in their home. She focused entirely on Emma. Emma came up in every conversation, whether it was about Emma's first words, her adorable tiny clothes, or Emma this or Emma that. Dad also became entangled in it. His attention suddenly shifted from assisting me with my math schoolwork to having tea party with his new kid. I made an effort to blend in. Yes, I did. I would attempt to engage in their chats, volunteer to help with Emma, and suggest family activities, but Mom would always find a way to keep me out of the picture. Emma's too young for that movie. We don't have room in the car. Emma gets fussy around bedtime, so maybe you should stay home. I felt like a ghost in my own home by the time I was in high school. They would neglect to call me down during family dinners. Somehow, they would forget to include me in their weekend vacation plans. They attended the ceremony when I graduated valedictorian, but they departed early because Emma had a soccer match. I received a full scholarship to attend a statewide institution. Honestly, that was the best day of my life. I put my belongings into 2 bags and left immediately. I studied finance and business, maintained good marks, and obtained internships. I was going to become successful. I assumed that I would return home for a few months after graduation in order to look for a career and accumulate money for a down payment. After all, I was also their daughter, right? Again, incorrect. Dad remarked, "You can stay 2 weeks," when I arrived with my bags and certificate. Emma wants additional room for her belongings. She is now 16. She requires seclusion. 2 weeks. I still hadn't found a job. However, Mom was nodding as though this was completely logical. "Sheila, you are now an adult. It's time to take charge of your life." While I was looking for a job, I spent a month staying at my friend Jessica's house. I found a small studio apartment, got a job at an accounting business, and began starting my career from the beginning. And I decided something. I had had enough of them. Okay, so long as they didn't want me in their life. I had more important things to accomplish than grovel for meager attention from folks who obviously didn't care about me. Here I was, 10 years later. Respect from my coworkers, a good income, and a financial director. For someone who was booted out at age 22 and had nowhere to go, I had done rather well. What the hell does he want now? Was my initial reaction when my assistant informed me that my father was downstairs. He was waiting for me as I rode the elevator down to the foyer. But he looked awful, Jesus. Dad had always been a large, strong man who had played football in high school and spent 20 years working in construction. He appeared to have aged 15 years since I last saw him. He was emaciated, pale, and had a grayish skin tone that made my stomach turn. Quietly, "Hi, Sheila," he murmured. "Dad," I said in a bland tone. "What's happening? Where can we have a conversation? Maybe grab some coffee." My building was just across from a cafe. Silently, we approached, placed our drink orders, and located a table in the corner. Dad continued to fiddle with his coffee cup while avoiding eye contact. "I have cancer," he eventually declared. "Pancreatic. According to doctors, if I'm lucky, I could have 2 or 3 years left." I gazed at him. After a decade of quiet, this is how we get back in touch. Nevertheless, he was still my father, the man who taught me how to ride a bike and looked under my bed for monsters, in spite of everything, even the hurt and rage. When I said, "I'm sorry," I meant it. "Can I help in any way? Assist with the expense of treatment or—" He gave a headshake. At this point, treatment isn't really an option. However, there is another factor. Taking a deep breath, Dad scanned the cafe as if to make sure we weren't being overheard. "The house," at last he murmured. "You remember the house we lived in when you were growing up?" Naturally, I recalled it. A pleasant 2-story home with a large backyard. Nice neighborhood. Actually, I had always adored that home. "What about it?" "I purchased it after the initial divorce between your mother and me. You were around 8 years old. Recall that shortly after she departed, we relocated there." I gave a nod. Just Dad and I had started again in that house. Well, I never did pay it off in full. Still has a mortgage attached to it, and the medical expenses and inability to work have made it impossible to work. He used both hands to touch his face. "I haven't made my payments yet. Foreclosure is a threat from the bank. The home will be taken by them." I had no idea where this was headed. "Dad, it is awful. However, I'm still not sure how I may be of assistance. I want to sell you the house. I owe the bank money, and you'll get it back. That way, your mom and Emma won't lose their house, and at least it stays in the family." I gazed at him. I was being asked to rescue their home by the man who had evicted me because his beloved Emma needed more room. Are you serious right now? I understand the sound. I am aware that I am unworthy of requesting anything from you after this. He walked away. "Sheila, I'm desperate though. I must prevent them from losing the house." My initial reaction was to scoff in his face and turn away. But then I gave it some thought. For months, I had been searching for a home, but I had not been able to find anything that I loved within my budget. Property values in that neighborhood had increased significantly over the years, and the family home was in a prime position. "How much do you still owe?" He gave me the number. In actuality, it was far less than what the house was likely worth at the time, far less than I had anticipated. His words, "This would be a real sale," went on. "Legal documentation and all things above board. You are the sole owner." I reclined in my seat. "All right, let me clarify. In order for Mom and Emma to continue living in the house where you evicted me 10 years ago, do you want me to purchase it?" He was graceful enough to appear embarrassed. "I know it's a lot to ask, but here's the thing. I'd always loved that house, and this would actually be a smart investment for me. Plus, I could afford it without stretching my budget too thin. If I do this," I said slowly, "what happens to them, Mom and Emma?" "They could stay. I mean, if you wanted them to. I wouldn't ask you to throw them out or anything." I thought about it for another minute. "Okay, I'll do it." His whole face lit up. "Really?" "Yeah." I finished my coffee and stood up. "Get me the paperwork. Bank information, mortgage details, whatever I need. My lawyer will handle the rest." We shook hands right there in the cafe, The weirdest business deal I'd ever made. 2 months later, it was official. I owned the house I grew up in, the house I'd been kicked out of, the house where I'd felt like an outsider for most of my childhood. Dad got enough money to pay off the mortgage and have some leftover for his expenses. Mom and Emma never knew. Far as they could tell, Dad had just figured out his financial problems somehow. Life went on like normal for them. A couple of months after that, Dad called me at work. "Would you come to dinner this Sunday? Family dinner." I hadn't been inside that house since the day they threw me out. "I don't know if that's such a great idea." "Please, Sheila, I'd really like to have all my girls together." I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. Plus, it was technically my house now, even if they didn't know it. Sunday came around, and I stood on the front porch for a solid 5 minutes before I rang the doorbell. Emma answered, and I barely recognized her. She was 26 now, tall and blonde like Mom, wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Oh," she said, not even trying to hide her disappointment. "You came." "Emma, be nice," Dad called from the kitchen. I followed her inside. The house looked exactly the same, which was weird. Same furniture, same pictures on the walls, same ugly lamp Mom had insisted on keeping in the living room. "Sheila's here," Emma announced like she was reporting a pest problem. Mom came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She'd aged better than Dad, but there was something hard around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Sheila, how nice." Her tone suggested it was anything but nice. Dad appeared and pulled me into a hug. He seemed genuinely happy to see me, which was more than I could say for the other two. We sat down to dinner, and it was every bit as awkward as I'd expected. Dad kept trying to make conversation while Mom and Emma basically ignored me. "So, what do you do for work now?" Dad asked. "I'm a financial director at Morrison & Associates." "That's wonderful. I always knew you were good with numbers." Emma snorted. "Financial director. Sounds boring." I noticed her purse hanging on the back of her chair, a designer bag that probably cost $3,000. When we'd gotten to the house, I'd seen a brand new Mercedes parked in the driveway with temp tags. "What about you, Emma? What are you up to these days?" She brightened up immediately. "Oh, I just got back from Europe. Spent 3 weeks in Paris and Italy. It was amazing." I looked at Dad, who suddenly seemed very interested in his mashed potatoes. "I bought so many beautiful things," Emma continued. "And this car, and I'm looking at getting my own apartment soon, somewhere nice, you know, with a doorman and everything." Mom was beaming at her like she'd just announced she'd won the Nobel Prize. I kept my mouth shut and finished my dinner. Let them enjoy spending the money I'd given Dad for the house. What did I care? After dinner, Dad walked me to my car. "Thank you for coming," he said. It meant a lot to me. "It was interesting," I said diplomatically. "Would you maybe come again next month?" I looked back at the house, my house, where Mom and Emma were probably already talking about what a downer I was. "Sure, Dad, I'll come again." The family dinners became a monthly thing. Same pattern every time. Dad would be genuinely happy to see me. Mom would be politely cold. And Emma would spend the entire meal bragging about whatever expensive thing she'd bought that month, designer shoes from Milan, a weekend spa retreat, some fancy jewelry. Always paid for with Dad's money, though they never mentioned where he was suddenly getting all this cash from. Mom would just smile and nod like Emma deserved every penny of it. I never said anything. I'd eat my dinner, make small talk with Dad, and leave. It was surreal sitting in my own house, pretending I was just a guest, but whatever. Let them have their fantasy. 6 months went by like this. Then Dad called me at work on a Tuesday, and I could barely understand him. "Sheila, can you come over? I'm having a bad day. Really bad." I left work early and drove straight over, used my key, and found Dad in bed looking like death warmed over. He was so pale his lips looked gray. "Where are Mom and Emma?" "Shopping," he whispered. "Always shopping." I sat on the edge of the bed. "Have you eaten today?" He shook his head weakly. So I went downstairs and made him some soup, helped him sit up enough to eat a few spoonfuls. That's when I realized nobody had been taking care of him. "Dad, when's the last time someone helped you shower?" "I can manage," he said. But we both knew that wasn't true. When Mom and Emma got home, loaded down with shopping bags, I confronted them. He's been in bed all day with no food. Mom shrugged. He said he wasn't hungry this morning. He's sick. Really sick. He needs help. We help, Emma said defensively. We just don't like, the gross stuff. The washing him and changing sheets and all that. It's disgusting. I stared at her. This was our father, and she thought taking care of him was disgusting. That night, I started coming over after work every day. I'd help Dad shower, make sure he ate something, do his laundry, basic human decency stuff that apparently was too much to ask from his wife and other daughter. A month later, Dad's condition got even worse. He could barely get out of bed on his own. Sheila, he said one evening while I was helping him into clean pajamas, would you consider moving back in? Just temporarily. I know it's a lot to ask, but I looked around my old bedroom. I'd been spending so much time here anyway, and my apartment lease was up for renewal next month. Yeah, okay. I'll move back in. Mom and Emma were not happy about this development. Why does she have to live here? Emma complained at dinner the night I moved my stuff back in. It's weird having her around all the time. Someone needs to take care of Dad, I said. If you two want to step up, I'll happily move back out. They both went quiet real fast. I arranged with my boss to work from home a couple of days a week so I could be around more. It was actually kind of nice being back in my old room. Even under these circumstances, I'd forgotten how much I'd loved the big window that looked out over the backyard. Meanwhile, Mom and Emma kept spending money like it was going out of style, new furniture for Emma's room, a complete wardrobe overhaul for Mom. Emma started talking about buying a second car. 2 months after I moved back in, Emma showed up with some guy. This is Tyler, she announced at dinner. My boyfriend. Tyler looked like every other 20-something douchebag you see at the gym, backwards baseball cap, too tight t-shirt, the kind of fake confidence that screams insecurity. After dinner, I was in the kitchen cleaning up when Emma cornered me. Tyler's going to be staying here from now on, she announced. He's moving in. So, you need to find somewhere else to live. I almost laughed. And why exactly would I do that? Because this isn't your house, she snapped. When Dad dies, everything goes to me and Mom. I've seen the will. This house, all his money, everything. So, you might as well get used to the idea of not being welcome here. I set down the dish I'd been washing and turned to face her. I'm not going anywhere, Emma. Dad wants me here to take care of him. Dad won't be around much longer, she said coldly. And when he's gone, Tyler and I are going to make some changes around here. Starting with getting rid of you. I just smiled and went back to washing dishes. We'll see about that. 3 months later, Dad died. I was with him at the end. Mom and Emma had gone out to buy funeral outfits. Their priority was looking good for the service, not being there when he actually passed. So, it was just me and Dad in his bedroom when he took his last breath. I held his hand and told him I forgave him for everything, and I meant it. The funeral was a circus. Mom and Emma showed up in designer black dresses that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. They cried prettily for the cameras and accepted condolences like they were grieving widows and daughters. I stayed at the cemetery after the service, talking with Dad's old friends and some cousins I hadn't seen in years. By the time I got back to the house, I found all my stuff in trash bags on the front lawn. I knocked on the door. Go away, Sheila, Mom called from inside. This house belongs to us now. You don't live here anymore. I could hear Tyler laughing in the background. I didn't make a scene. I loaded my stuff into my car and drove to Jessica's place. She let me crash in her spare room, just like old times. I'm sorry about your dad, she said. And I'm sorry your family sucks. Thanks, but don't worry about them. They're about to get a very unpleasant surprise. 2 days later, the lawyer called. Miss Henderson, this is Robert Chun from Chin and Associates. I need you to come in for the reading of your father's will. Can you be here Friday at 2? Friday came, and I showed up at the lawyer's office in my best business suit. Mom, Emma, and Tyler were already there, all smiles and expensive clothes. Emma kept whispering to Tyler about what they were going to do with their inheritance. Mr. Chin cleared his throat and opened the folder. Let's begin. The last will and testament of Robert Henderson. Emma was practically bouncing in her seat. To my wife, Sarah, I leave half of my remaining bank accounts and savings. Mom smiled and squeezed Emma's hand. To my daughter Emma, I leave the other half of my bank accounts and savings, plus all personal property within the house, including furniture, electronics, and other belongings. Yes, Emma whispered. To my daughter Sheila, I leave my personal library and book collection. Emma was grinning like she'd won the lottery. What about the house? She asked. Mr. Chin looked confused. The house isn't mentioned in the will. What do you mean it's not mentioned? Mom demanded. Of course, it's mentioned. He owns the house. According to my records, your husband didn't own the house at the time of his death. It appears to have been sold over a year ago. The room went dead silent. That's impossible, Mom said, her voice getting shrill. There must be some mistake. I stood up slowly. There's no mistake. The house belongs to me. I bought it from Dad over a year ago. Emma's face went white. What? I reached into my purse and pulled out the deed. Dad needed money to pay off the mortgage. So, I bought the house. Legal sale, properly recorded. It's been mine for 14 months. You're lying, Emma screamed. I handed the deed to Mr. Chin. He examined it and nodded. This appears to be legitimate. The property was transferred to Sheila Henderson in March of last year. Mom snatched the papers from his hands and stared at them. This can't be real. This is fraud. She tricked him. Nobody tricked anybody, I said calmly. Dad needed help. I helped him. Simple as that. You knew. Emma was on her feet now, pointing at me. You knew we thought we were getting the house. You never asked. You just assumed. But we've been living there. We've been spending money on it. You've been spending the money Dad got when he sold it to me. Money he gave you freely. I shrugged. Not my problem. Emma turned to Tyler, who suddenly looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Do something. She can't just steal our house. It's not your house, I said. It never was your house. And speaking of which, you have 2 weeks to move out. 2 weeks? Mom shrieked. We can't find a place in 2 weeks. You should have thought of that before you threw my belongings on the lawn. I walked toward the door, ignoring their shouting. Sheila, wait, Mom called after me. We can work something out. You can live there, too. We'll share the house. I looked back at them. Funny how you want to share now that you know it's mine. My phone kept ringing for the following week. Mom cries and begs. Emma yelling and threatening to file a lawsuit. I was persuaded to allow them to stay by Tyler's argument that Emma was fragile. When Mom phoned the night before their deadline, I answered, but otherwise I ignored most of the calls. Please, Sheila. There is nowhere for us to reside. With what's left over from Dad's money, you may consider getting a mortgage. If you're ready to pay monthly, I've heard there are some lovely apartments available. However, we've already spent a lot of money. Almost nothing remains in the accounts. That's your problem, as I mentioned. On the day following Dad's funeral, you kicked me out of the house. You placed my belongings on the grass in garbage bags. I'm not going to assist you. She ended the call. I took my key and drove to the residence 2 weeks later. Mom and Emma were piling boxes into the moving truck in the driveway. Everything, including appliances, light fixtures, and furnishings, had been stolen. For heaven's sake, they had even stolen the toilet seats. Dad's books were all that remained, still arranged on the shelves of his former study. I was in the doorway when Emma noticed me. She responded, "This is all your fault," as tears ran down her cheeks. We're going to be living in some shitty apartment because of you. You're living in a shitty apartment because you spent all your inheritance money on stupid crap instead of being responsible adults. Without saying another word, they drove off. I grinned as I stood in my deserted home. Yes, everything had been gone, but I could replace everything. I saved money and had an excellent work. They were left with nothing. I learned of their fates via common friends over the course of the following several months. For the first time in 20 years, Mom had to return to full-time employment. Emma found a job at a retail establishment after selling her Mercedes. As soon as Tyler understood she was no longer wealthy, he broke up with her. About 6 months later, they made another attempt to see the residence. Arrived at my door looking contrite and remorseful. We want to make peace, Mom was saying. We are related. We ought to remain united. Through the screen door, I could see Emma looking worn out and discouraged, and Mom dressed like she was visiting a bargain store. I responded, "No thanks," and shut the door. The house has been my home for the past 2 years. Had it set up just the way I wanted it, with hardwood flooring throughout, a new kitchen, and renovated bathrooms. It's stunning. I sometimes reflect on how strange life is when reading Dad's books in his study. I now find refuge in the home where I was never accepted. I'm doing well while the family who tossed me out is having trouble. Should I feel guilty about it? Not at all. They made their decisions. Mine was mine. I took care of Dad when he was dying and volunteered to help him when he needed it. They couldn't be there for him because they were too busy preparing their inheritance and spending money. In my lovely home, which I own free and clear, I get a good night's sleep. And I'm okay with being the antagonist in their tale if that's the case. Occasionally, the good folks do end up winning.